legal duty was criminally negligent. And 4, the defendant's failure to perform that legal duty caused the death of Michael Joseph Jackson. A physician who has assumed the responsibility to treat and care for a patient has a legal duty to treat and care for that patient. Criminal negligence involves more than ordinary carelessness, inattention, or mistaken judgment. A person acts or fails to perform a legal duty with criminal negligence when, 1, he or she acts or fails to perform a legal duty in a reckless way that creates a high risk of death or great bodily injury, and 2, a reasonable person would have known that acting or failing to perform a legal duty in that way would create such a risk. In other words, a person acts or fails to perform a legal duty with criminal negligence when the way he or she acts or fails to perform a legal duty is so different from how an ordinarily careful person would act in the same situation that his or her act or failure to perform a legal duty amounts to disregard for human life or indifference to the consequences of that act or failure to perform a legal duty. Great bodily injury means significant or substantial physical injury. It is an injury that is greater than minor or moderate harm. An act or failure to perform a legal duty causes the death if the death is the direct, natural, and probable consequence of the act or the failure to perform a legal duty, and the death would not have happened without the act or the failure to perform a legal duty. A natural and probable consequence is one that a reasonable person would know is likely to happen if nothing unusual intervenes. In deciding whether a consequence is natural and probable, consider all the circumstances established by the evidence. There may be more than one cause of death. An act or a failure to perform a legal duty causes the death only if it is a substantial factor in causing the death. A substantial factor is more than a trivial or remote factor. However, it does not have to be the only factor that causes the death. To relieve a defendant of criminal liability, an intervening cause must be an unforeseeable and extraordinary occurrence. A defendant remains criminally liable for the death if either the possible consequence might reasonably have been contemplated or the defendant should have foreseen the possibility of harm of the kind that could result from his or her act. The failure of the alleged victim, Michael Joseph Jackson, or another person to use reasonable care may have contributed to the death. However, if the defendant's act or the defendant's failure to perform a legal duty was a substantial factor causing the death, then the defendant is legally responsible for the death, even though Michael Joseph Jackson or another person may have failed to use reasonable care. If you have a reasonable doubt whether the defendant's act or failure to perform a legal duty caused the death, you must find him not guilty. For you to find a person guilty of the crime of involuntary manslaughter in violation of Penal Code Section 192, Subdivision B, that person must commit an act with criminal negligence or fail to perform a legal duty with criminal negligence. Criminal negligence has been defined in the instructions on that crime. Defenses. The defendant is not guilty of involuntary manslaughter if, without criminal negligence on his part, he accidentally acted or accidentally failed to perform a legal duty. You may not find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter unless you are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that, with criminal negligence, he acted or failed to perform a legal duty. Criminal negligence is defined in another instruction. Unanimity. In order to prove that the defendant is guilty of involuntary manslaughter in count 1, the people have presented evidence of more than one act or of more than one failure to perform a legal duty. You must not find the defendant guilty unless, 1, all of you agree that the people have proved that the defendant committed at least one of these acts or the people have proved at least one failure to perform a legal duty. And 2, all of you further agree on the same act or on the same failure to perform a legal duty. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop right now. As you can see, the next caption is post-trial concluding series. Those are the instructions that I'm going to give to you after the attorneys present their arguments. I can see some of you are looking at the pages. You can see it's a lot shorter than the instructions I just read to you. We think you deserve a few minutes to take a breather. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 10 or 15-minute break at this time. Of course, remember all the admonishments, the written and the verbal admonishments, and you can leave behind your instruction packet, and we'll buzz you in about 10 or 15 minutes. Thank you.